Namaskar viewers, hello and welcome to Sansad TV. I'm Tina Jha, you're watching Perspective. Disasters today are becoming more frequent, more costly and more devastating than ever before. According to the Global Assessment Report on Disaster Risk Reduction 2025, direct disaster costs have surged to nearly $2.3 trillion every year. The human toll is equally alarming. In 2024, almost 46 million people were displaced from their homes, the highest number ever recorded because of disasters. The United Nations has underlined that financing remains the single greatest challenge linking the disaster, climate, development and humanitarian domains. Reflecting this urgency, the theme for this year's International Day for Disaster Risk Reduction, observed every year on the 13th of October, is Fund Resilience, Not Disasters. So it's a call to governments, institutions and partners across the world to place resilience at the heart of climate and development action. India, over the past decade, has adopted a holistic and proactive approach to disaster risk reduction, focusing on preparedness, response, capacity building, recovery and mitigation, while leveraging innovation, technology, as well as international cooperation. On the show today, we will discuss India's evolving disaster management framework, the progress we've made, but the challenges that also persist, and the vision for a resilient 21st century India. Besides, we'll also explore the pathways being built to reduce the risks, prevent displacement, and create safer, more sustainable futures. To discuss this further, I'm being joined by three distinguished guests. So let me begin the program by introducing them to you. With me in the studio is Ms. Suruchi Bhadwal. She is Director, Climate Change and Air Quality Division, the Energy and Resources Institute. Ms. Bhadwal, thank you for joining us on the program. Welcome to Sansad TV. Also joining us is Professor Santosh Kumar, CEO, International Institute of Security and Safety Management. He's also former Professor and Executive Director, NIDM, Ministry of Home Affairs, Government of India. Professor, glad to have you with us on the program.
Thank you so much.
And joining us virtually is Mr. David White, Director, Advocacy and Communications, Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure, that's called the CDRI. Mr. White, thank you for joining us on the program. In fact, let's begin the conversation with you. So this year, as I outlined, the theme of International Day for Disaster Risk Reduction is Fund Resilience, Not Disasters. How does this theme resonate with CDRI's mission and work globally? In fact, the CDRI was formed in 2019 under India's leadership. The Prime Minister had launched it at the UN Climate Conference as well. So talk to us about how this journey has been, but at the same time, how the particular theme this year aligns with your organization's work and objectives.
Thank you very much for the question and for focusing on this really important subject today. As you mentioned, today is the International Day for Disaster Risk Reduction, and the theme today resonates very strongly with the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure. CDRI is a coalition of 50 countries and 10 international organizations established by India and with a specific focus on disaster resilient infrastructure. This is infrastructure that can absorb, adapt, and bounce back from extreme weather events. And we focus broadly on two vital areas. The first is on infrastructure sectors that are critical. These are sectors such as power, telecom, transport. When they're affected, have a disproportionate impact. So for example, if a bridge is destroyed, a pregnant woman can't reach a hospital. If the power system is down, small and medium enterprises can't function. If the telecom system is down, the emergency services can't be called. And the second is a focus on geographies extremely at risk, such as small island developing states, cities and urban areas, and mountainous regions. To come back to the theme, investment in disaster resilient infrastructure, and more broadly in disaster risk reduction, is investment that pays for itself. It protects lives, safeguards economies, and promotes growth. And in support of this, CDRI is now supporting 183 projects across the world, including supporting our member countries to devise new building codes, supporting schools to deal with extreme heat, and helping small island developing states implement early warning systems against major threats such as tsunamis and cyclones.
Sure, we will discuss further about some of the projects and successes that you've seen in different parts of the world. But coming to the funding mechanisms and particularly, how does CDRI advocate for financial mechanisms which prioritize prevention and preparedness over post-disaster response?
Absolutely. So it is essential to be prepared rather than to respond to disasters. And in terms of financing mechanisms, one of the ways that CDRI is supporting this is through a project with India, as well as Nepal, Mauritius, and Fiji, where we are collaborating with the governments to develop disaster risk financing frameworks. These are frameworks that look at and assess potential losses from hazards and extreme weather events and identify gaps in funding. This allows the governments to make risk-informed decisions and risk-informed financial planning, including allocating resources to be better prepared for extreme weather events.
Okay, Professor Kumar, we've seen India adopting a more holistic approach, which deals with a range of issues. So we are also focusing more on preparedness over disaster response, and for which I recall the Prime Minister gave a 10-point agenda back in 2019. Right. We've also tried to streamline multiple agencies into working together and addressing issues aimed at risk reduction. But in that context, you are somebody who brings in a lot of experience because you've worked in this area for decades. How would you assess India's evolution in the area of disaster management? So what we are talking about is from relief and response to a more proactive risk reduction based approach. How do you identify this?
It's very interesting, and we should compliment that how Government of India has taken that framework up front. In terms of then we say that Prime Minister 10-point agenda is just not the agenda, but it's a kind of a commandments in terms of the disaster risk reduction, but supplemented what we say that the things are there in the line, but how to achieve all these goals. So that was very important to supplement with the budget. So that 15th Finance Commission brought to a kind of a sea change in the India's framework for disaster risk reduction. Like say that earlier we had a response mechanism, and it was happening until you can say that 1999 super cyclone which happened all through the response and relief only, and we had a kind of a relief manual which was a British manual where the whole of the country was actually being governed by the relief manual. But after 2001 when the earthquake happened in Gujarat, from there actually the things is starting as a kind of a turning point. So Government of Gujarat brought the first kind of a act, Disaster Management Act, and in the long-term recovery and reconstruction given priority with the inbuilt in the kind of a resilience kind of a recovery. So here, whatever you're recovering, like the housing or the roads or the bridges, you have to have a kind of a resilient mechanism into the practice. So that was first time brought in and the same was repeated then in 1999 also going back to the recovery. So when that time the subject got transferred in the 2005 and 2002 the subject got transferred from Ministry of Agriculture to the Ministry of Home Affairs. Okay. So there the thought came as that why not have a kind of a national legislation. So it's not that only the Gujarat has brought, so why not as a country as a whole, we should think as a kind of a legislation where everybody has to actually, and there the extremely this important to mention here that the focus was given on the prevention and this mitigation. So risk reduction came as a kind of a part and parcel of the act. So there the provision of Disaster Management Act, disaster resilient recovery, and so that institutional systems for that. So National Disaster Management Authority was created, then the State Disaster Authority got created. So the State District Disaster Authority created. It's just not the federal agencies, but also down the line when you're going to the district level. And on the other hand, response agencies or NDRF, SDRF and district level response system. So what is happening that the one side there was a response and relief which was important. Even today you are not going to achieve everything in one day. Absolutely. So that's the process that has to be done. But the second important thing also to strengthen the response and relief so that the lives can be taken care of, so that life loss can be recovered and not actually the impact should not be very high. So what happened in the entire framework today when we are talking about 15th Finance Commission, now 16th Finance Commission, resilient is the key parameter to be taken up. So this is a state subject. So every state has to gear up in that. So how the federal agencies is working, how the federal government is taking care of that. So prevention, mitigation fund, recovery and reconstruction. On the other hand also, the what point as what I'm trying to say here, response and relief has always been very, very visible. So the focus is on remained largely on that. But mitigation and resilience is invisible. For challenge for an entire framework which we are focusing, how to make invisible visible. That is much more important. The success stories, where the prevention has paid, how the risk reduction has paid, because it doesn't take care of the headlines. Headlines comes from the response or the disaster happens. So that what we are saying that now we need to also change this paradigm. So India is working for that. India is committed to take that forward, and most of the programs now that Government of India is focusing on integrating mainstreaming disaster risk reduction as a part and parcel.
Absolutely.
Recently, recently in the post-disaster scenario, we went to Himachal and other affected states and Uttarakhand. We find that you have given the data of the loss. So most of the states which is getting affected is crossing the 30,000 mark of the crores of mark in the disaster damage. So this is, even though economically and a scale of economy is much more important to start focusing on resilience. So very rightly said, invest here in the kind of a resilience. It is not expenditure.
Certainly. Resilience is the word today, but how we reached here is what I'm also going to ask Ms. Suruchi Badwal in context of climate change also. This was about, he explained to us how the mechanism has evolved and how it has led to the kind of approach that we are seeing today on part of the government. But India is also vulnerable to extreme climatic events, and we've seen examples of that, especially in our hill states of Uttarakhand and Himachal Pradesh. We're also seeing erratic monsoons, rising temperatures, and of course not to talk about the extreme weather events. But how have these climate-induced risks also shaped our understanding and approach towards disaster risk reduction is something that I want to understand from you.
So India is a large country and we are exposed to all kinds of disasters. I would start with that. And of course, there's a very close connect that we see with regards to the disasters that are unfolding and the enhanced climate environment that we are situated in today. While concentrations of greenhouse gases kept increasing and changes in the climate system kept happening, what we've observed is in this kind of a condition and environment that we are situated in, and of course it's changing over time, the nature of these disasters have changed. A 1 in a 100-year event, a 1 in a 50-year event is striking at a much early rate and intensity that we see across different parts of the country, and therefore your level of preparedness to be able to deal with the consequences of such events that are striking you yet again basically has to be far greater than what possibly we had planned for. So as a result, what happens is, if you start integrating the climate risks into your planning process, you would basically see that you need much more action to be happening on the ground with regards to your preparedness or mitigation strategies that you would like to push down, to be able to reduce the kind of risks that people are exposed to, the economic losses that are basically happening because of these disasters yet again. And that integration so far, we don't think so has happened effectively. We still keep talking about disasters, separately compared to the focus that we have on climate change, risk resilience and adaptation. And I feel every piece of work out there that is basically being looked at on risk resilience needs to integrate with disasters, the climate context, so that you have a better planning towards these disasters we are talking about in the future.
I had a question for you regarding that in mind, that for climate researchers, for climate scientists, you would see climate adaptation and disaster risk reduction from the same lens. But for the other stakeholders, including those who are making policies, perhaps it's a separate domain altogether.
Yeah,
but it's important now in the given context, in the current context, to integrate the two.
These, yeah.
On that aspect, what kind of progress have we made? And especially India, when we say we have a holistic and integrated approach, have we also taken care of this?
So we haven't yet done that very effectively. I would basically say that, because we've been trying to set that agenda in place, but on in reality, we've not been able to get these departments together. In reality, we've not been able to have those conversations together to be able to make meaningful, conclusions out of it with regards to what the government needs to do in terms of taking the steps in the years to come. Because when we talk about climate change, of course, people say we are talking about long term, but no, it's not long term any longer. We are experiencing these events now and the intensities which have changed now, and therefore this integration was required much earlier, which we haven't done effectively. As a result, we would again make the call that this integration of disasters with the climate risks we are talking about in the future context for your planning needs to happen now and today.
Okay, Professor Kumar, in that context, if I may ask you, we are seeing how the government is also trying to bring a lot of focus on what was invisible so far. So that reflects in our policies, and that's also yielded in the kind of progress if we look back at the decade. In that context, be it through smart cities, housing or infrastructure, there's been a major policy leap, at least on paper. There have been some gaps in the implementation that we will talk about. But how effectively are these risk-informed approaches being implemented on the ground? Because India is a large but also a diverse country. So we have disparities in different states.
I fully agree and endorse your point, what you are saying. It's very important to look at the dynamics of risk also. So cities are growing, and we say that by 2050, that 50% of the population would be living in the cities. So now the question and the dynamics of infrastructure, whether in the same proportion, our infrastructure is also growing. You are seeing the cities, what happened in this flood, this monsoon season. Most of the cities were flooded. You name the cities and the big cities, you have Bangalore, Chennai and Mumbai, Delhi and all. So what is happening on the pressure on the infrastructure, which is happening because of the expansion of the cities. Now coming to the risk-informed planning, inbuilt environment is a challenge which is already there. So now you have to expand and correct it, do the retrofitting of the systems, the drainage and everything. But the second is also that new development is also coming side by side. Larger investment, if you see that government is planning in the urban area also, if you see the $1 trillion investment is by 2047. So coping with that, the investment, that whether this investment is a risk-informed investment, this is a challenge for the planner. So when we are making roads, we are making drainage, where we are making housing, in most of the disaster scenario, what we have seen, and is impact on the housing sector is the most. So 70% of the cost is going on the housing sector. The second important thing is the infrastructure. So how to combine these two? People are whether informed about the risk, what they are buying. So how that risk-informed people, it's not everything we cannot say that government should do this or X, Y, Z and all. It is the challenge of all the stakeholders, that how the stakeholders are informed and how the informed stakeholder, whether it's the banking loan system, if they are funding in the high-risk area, they should ask the loanee that yes, you have to take care of all these mitigation measures, then this would be funded. Otherwise, it would be high interest. Same other thing as an insurance. So if you are going in that area, you can ask that insurance companies to go for those who have the affordability can take insurance. An insurance company, whereby they will enforce that in the cities which you are going to plan and going to live. So they have to, as a kind of a force on mitigation and resilience measure, otherwise premium value go high. So how that each kind of a household, like residential complexes, they are taking as a collective insurance also as a kind of a new resilience financial mechanism. So many of the places what we see where disaster happen, people go berserk because of the loss to the property. So one is the life loss is one challenge, but also to restart their life, they don't have the money to start. So government aid would come as a ex gratia, not as a compensation. So both ways, we have to one side, we have to build and a risk-informed development so that everyone is aware, and government will support those initiatives with the program and the policies.
So you've highlighted multiple aspects. I'll take on the infrastructure bit that you spoke about because that way I can relate it to the CDRI report, which says 60% of the infrastructure that the world needs by 2050 is yet to be built, and that too without resilience. Mr. White, since CDRI brings together a lot of countries, you spoke about organizations, partners, knowledge partners as well. Explain to us, how does this coalition model help drive resilience at a larger scale? So we can say within territories, maybe it's easier to implement, but when you talk of global initiatives, what kind of challenges do you face? But still, how do you manage to implement it, especially in countries that are yearning for that kind of development and fund, and you need to bring it from the developed world?
Absolutely. So climate change is a shared challenge, and resilience is a shared challenge. Every year, 15% of global GDP is at risk from extreme weather events and disasters. At the same time, the quantum of investment needed in infrastructure is only going up. We know that by 2050, the world will need $9.2 trillion each year to be invested to meet global infrastructure needs. So this is a challenge that no country can meet alone, however big, however wealthy. And so groups such as CDRI, bringing countries together with organizations, with experts, to focus on challenges such as resilience are vital. And we're doing this in three broad ways. The first is by providing bespoke expertise. For example, we've recently worked with five Indian states, Assam, Gujarat, Odisha, Tamil Nadu, and Uttarakhand, to support them to develop a roadmap to enhance resilience of their telecom sector. The second is by providing finance for projects. I've mentioned some of our support for small island developing states, but with generous funding from the government of India, we've recently announced 5 projects to support cities across Bhutan, Brazil, Honduras, India, and Sri Lanka respond to challenges of extreme heat and urban water resilience. And the third is by sharing good practice. And one way we do this is by bringing together communities of practice. So people with a specific knowledge area or specific focus. And last year, for example, we convened a community of practice on how urban metro systems can respond to the challenges of extreme heat. And one of the users that was able to join was the Delhi metro system. Now, if you think of where metro systems are around the world, lots of them are in places where, when they were developed, often 100 years ago, there were no challenge of extreme heat. Where Delhi was built from the ground up to be able to respond to a number of challenges, including heat. And so we were able to take that learning, that good practice, and share it across the coalition.
So India's own experiences are helping the CDRI shape their approaches and their policies at the global level. But at the same time, how do you think, when we talk about funding mechanisms, how can multilateral development banks, also the private investors, more and more governments worldwide, collaborating to mainstream resilience, particularly in infrastructure financing? Because that's what we need when we say 60% of the infrastructure that the world needs by 2050 in the next 25 years is yet to be built.
Absolutely. So first, I would say we're absolutely drawing on India's experience. In fact, CDRI itself is an example of India's global leadership in the climate space. I think in terms of responding to the question on financing, there's 2 levels to this. The first is at the national level, where MDBs and governments can support in de-risking investments by providing credit guarantees and enhancement, blended finance mechanisms that will then encourage and support the private sector to invest more heavily. And the second is at the project level, where when developing projects, it's essential to have robust preparation with sound disaster risk reduction components. And to support that, CDRI has been working with the government of India, and we've developed a cost-benefit analysis tool and tested that across 5 projects in India. And that has shown that across these projects, for every 1 rupee invested in resilience, so there's a small extra cost, but for every 1 rupee invested, there is a return of 7 to 12 rupees across the asset's life cycle. So this is an investment that pays for itself, that returns a resilience dividend.
Okay, let me take on the point of community engagement, because alongside financing, the other aspect which has been focused a lot about, and something that Professor you've also spoken about, is the importance of community as the first responder. In the Indian context, what kind of progress have we made in strengthening local level capacity, especially among, say, the panchayats? There are also self-help groups, also youth volunteers at different levels, also in urban localities, but more so in rural areas. We see a lot of community engagement, and we need to strengthen that capacity.
Yeah, it's long back when India started with the community-based disaster management program. But that was not intensified for maybe to the larger scale. But this is important that we should talk about reverse pyramid approach. A reverse pyramid approach, when I say, is this national level institutional system are very good, very important, and that is as a very high quality system. But now we need to reverse this pyramid to the local level also. Right. So local level, many a lot of institutions are there, and then community workers, community institutions, they are there. The idea is we need to, if we pick up the PM 10-point agenda, there also we are focusing on the community-based initiatives and the local level capacity building. This time, 2025, the Disaster Management Act has been amended, and they have focused, especially for the urban area, creating an authority for urban authority for the local bodies. So there would be created, the body has been created by the act of law. The idea is to how to strengthen now, so that the journey is to strengthening those with a lot of capacity to be built at the municipal corporation level, municipality level, and also to the rural areas, the panchayat level. This is the kind of a missing link which we can say that to be strengthened. So the budgeting which is coming, maybe the 15th Finance Commission and the 16th Finance Commission, which is already there now, sitting there and coming with the recommendations. So I would suggest that how that money can go as a mitigation fund to the strengthening the community institutions at the local level. Because local level, we also started at the ISSM level, going to the this every kind of a society, there's a RWA, and starting whether you are aware about the warning is already there for the bigger disaster, say earthquake. So Delhi and NCR region is in zone 4 and highly vulnerable to earthquake. But people they have this information, but are they taking action for that? So for what they are waiting for? So the idea is to how this message can translate in building local capacity, because that 50 seconds are very important when the earthquake strikes. So idea is to see that how this information that Delhi is on Delhi NCR or maybe any other states like Himalayan states on a high risk on earthquake. So taking this as an example that how these community institutions are getting geared up, how the panchayat, how the local body, or how even the RWAs are actually getting ready for it. So what are their response mechanism and what are their kind of because we say in the high Delhi traffic, even if the reaching out to that place is very, very challenging. So whether we have an inbuilt mechanism to respond such kind of a disaster for 0 to say half hour, say even if half hour. So responding, I say that in the entire process of this, I was telling that private security agencies here in India is 90 lakhs in number, where the civil police is to 25 lakhs. So idea is, so this is a national resource. How to capitalize this national resource in capacity building of the people well in advance rather than waiting for the disaster to happen. So that's what we are saying, that how community institutions can be strengthened by kind of a institution like NDMA is taking and they are making Apada Mitra. So Apada Mitra is one, but we said that Resilient Mitra would have been much better. But anyway, this is a very successful program of the government. So
in fact, that's been one of our success stories, something that we should replicate across states for better results. So to summarize, we've invested heavily in the last few years in community preparedness, in building resilient infrastructure, but also in technological interventions that have made it easier for us to say that there are early warning systems that we can talk about. But if we say looking ahead, there are challenges that perhaps persist in implementation of these policies, but also given the grave challenges in terms of the climate changes that are happening. So something that we may anticipate the scale and the intensity would be much bigger than what's coming upon us. And maybe we will realize that we were not prepared for this. In that context, if you have to summarize, how would you see the next decade? We've seen significant progress over the last decade, but how do you see the next decade unfolding for India in terms of building climate smart cities, resilient agriculture, but most importantly, sustainable infrastructure, given that we are today now the most populated country in the world and we have very limited resources, and the burden is on the urban India to house the significant percentage of that population?
Yeah, so coming down to the response measures that we are talking about that are needed, I think first and foremost what is required is that every individual out there needs to be aware of the risks he or she is exposed to, and that this will basically become far more intense and regular in the years to come. Yeah. And therefore, then what kind of measures are we talking about with regards to the responses that are needed, needs to be communicated to them. So he made a very valid point. Yes, India had a CBDRM, which is the community-based disaster risk management program, which was aiming to reach every panchayat and household with regards to information on disasters and disaster risk management. But we still do not see the community that aware with regards to when it comes to being the first responders and reducing the level of risk at their own level until external help comes to you. And the reason for it is people just don't understand sometimes the language that is being communicated. It's about communications and the manner in which those communications are going to the people. Because, I think the need is to simplify the scientific jargon and context in which we are speaking to people, which they are not supposed to be understanding, and the information needs to be translated in very simple forms to the community so that they are able to understand what they should be doing when the risk levels are possibly high, medium or low. And that translation, standard operating protocols that are needed with regards to each risk that we are talking about. If it's a heat wave condition, then what do people need to do if the alert is a high alert that we are giving? Even people in Delhi don't understand that. For example, we did a survey where we tried to understand how the heat action plans of every city are being understood by the community of that in the cities, and we found people just don't understand. You are saying temperature thresholds are going up, the Met department is saying that, but fine, people have just absorbed that information, but they just don't know what are the do's and don'ts.
When we say build resilience, it's not just the investments, it's the community awareness and the community preparedness, of course. And most importantly, how we build or how we foresee a future which is sustainable. So it's every stakeholder that has to pitch in and do their bit. I think time allows us to take up only that much on the program. Thank you to all my guests for joining in and sharing your thoughts and views with us and our viewers. To you viewers, thank you very much for your time as well.
Thank you so much.
To watch more programs of Sansad TV, subscribe to our YouTube channel and don't forget to like and share them.